We now move on to Council and Commission statements, presentation of the programme of activities of the German presidency. I should like to inform members that for all the debates of this part session, there is no catch-the-eye procedure and that no blue cards will be accepted. I'd now like to give the floor to the German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Go ahead, please.
President, Commission President, honourable members, I am here in the European Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, and it is my great pleasure to address the Chamber at the start of the German presidency. Like many of you, I have missed the direct in-person contact. This is my first trip since the pandemic started, and I deliberately chose to come here to the heart of European democracy at a time when the European Union wishes to stand resolute in the face of this crisis. At such a time, the EU needs the European Parliament. There are huge challenges ahead that require enormous effort. We need parliamentary debate, we need political coordination, cultural translation and mediation between different countries and regions. And so we need you, and it is a particular honour for me today to present the priorities of the German presidency. There are 5 priorities, I feel, at the current juncture: fundamental rights, cohesion, climate protection, digitalization, and Europe's responsibility in the world. These 5 priorities are very important because we need sustainable change in Europe to safeguard, preserve Europe. Only in this way will Europe cope with the lightning speed of change and ensure its sovereignty and responsibility and fully live up to its role. We are all aware that my visit today comes at a time when the European Union is facing its greatest challenge ever. The global pandemic has hit people hard in Europe. Over 100,000 lives have been lost in Europe alone. Many citizens were not able to visit loved ones because of strict quarantine rules, bid farewell to them as they passed. We must bear that in mind when we commit to economic recovery. We need to mourn our dead, recognise the pain of farewells that were not possible. That will stay with us for some time to come. Our economy has been dealt a severe blow. Millions have lost their jobs. They are also worried about their own health, the health of their family members. In addition, many citizens fear for their very livelihoods. They need our shared common support. We need to break transmission chains. To this end, the most basic fundamental rights had to be restricted. That was a high price to pay. Generations in Europe fought hard for those fundamental rights. Human rights, civil liberties are the most valuable asset we have in Europe. Only for very important reasons, for a short space of time, should such rights be restricted. A pandemic should never be used as a pretext to erode democratic principles. All countries in Europe has a different recollection of the upheaval of the past, the fight for freedom, rule of law, democracy. But those achievements form the basis of fundamental rights in Europe. Now, for me personally, I spent 35 years of my life in an unfree society, and so restricting rights during the pandemic really was a very difficult decision for me. Germany is taking on the European Council presidency at an important time. We will show great respect and invest great passion into this challenge. I believe in Europe. I am a fervent advocate of Europe, not just as a legacy from the past, but as a harbinger of hope for the future. Europe is not something passed down to us, some sort of fate that is incumbent upon us. Europe is a living project that we can shape and change. Europe does not restrict our room for manoeuvre. In a globalised world, Europe gives us more room for manoeuvre. It is only with Europe that we can maintain our freedoms. And so more than ever before, we need to focus on fundamental rights. We need mutual assistance and support, solidarity, a community spirit. Europe will only be safeguarded if we offer innovative responses to the challenges of climate change, digitalization, and our responsibility in the world. Those are the huge challenges facing us. But I am confident. Look back at the various tests and trials that Europe has already overcome. The failed draft treaty, the constitutional treaty 15 years ago, the economic and financial crisis and the tough battles we had then, or the mass movement of refugees 5 years ago. It's never been easy. There have always been moments of hurt. But the most bitter crises have helped us to listen, to better understand the needs and concerns of others. We have learnt together. Europe has overcome all these crises because at the end of the day, everyone is aware of what is invaluable: fundamental rights and cohesion. Human rights, civil liberties, human dignity, civic rights, all those various rights, the protection against discrimination, equality, genuine equality, all these values form the cornerstone, the ethical cornerstone of the EU. These rights apply to everyone, not just for some, and for some more, less for others. Not just for some of the time, and for others, well, not always. They apply always across the board, and that is what we must guarantee through the EU. That is its promise. Citizens must be free. They must enjoy religious freedom, political, cultural freedom. They must be able to explore their own happiness. Democracy, European democracy, requires open, critical debate. We don't want to stifle opposition. Such a democracy where religious, social, cultural diversity is silenced is no true democracy. The pandemic has made clear to all how valuable fundamental rights are, how basic our freedoms are, how essential they are. We must safeguard those fundamental rights. And to that end, Europe needs strong institutions, the Commission, the Court of Justice and the European Parliament. Fundamental rights are the priority that I see at the start of the presidency. And that brings me on to cohesion. Europe will only emerge from the crisis stronger than ever if we are willing to overcome our differences and identify shared solutions. If we are willing to view the world through the prism of others. Europe will emerge from the crisis stronger than ever if we strengthen cohesion and solidarity. No one will get through this crisis alone. We are all vulnerable. European solidarity is not just a humanitarian gesture, it is a sustainable investment. European solidarity isn't just a political imperative, it is well worth our while. It will yield benefits, and that is the leitmotif of our presidency, together for Europe's recovery. I will work together with the German government and invest great passion to that end, but I need you too. We need to safeguard Europe. We need the Parliament to that end. You mediate between the different views and help to strike compromise. You represent 450 million citizens across 27 member states. You translate European principles. You explain Europe to citizens and mediate between Brussels, Strasbourg and your home regions. You communicate in 24 different languages and you experience diversity and various experiences on a daily basis. Only with you can we explain Europe to the different member states. So I ask you to be mediators and to help secure cohesion at this difficult time. Help to foster greater understanding, mutual understanding. Help us to strengthen European cohesion. The top priority in the German presidency will be unity in Europe to ensure that Europe emerges more united from the crisis. But we don't just want a short-term fix. That would not be enough. We want a Europe that offers hope, that is confident and brave in tackling the challenges of the current day. We want a future-proofed Europe, innovative, sustainable Europe that can take its place in the world. We want to see a stronger Europe. And this prompted the Franco-German proposal mid-May. Together with Emmanuel Macron, the French president, I suggested a European recovery fund of €500 billion. I am delighted to note that the European Commission has taken on board many facets of that Franco-German proposal in its MFF proposal and proposal for a recovery fund. That will be discussed now at the European Council under the leadership of Charles Michel. We want to reach agreement swiftly. We have seen huge economic upheaval and we cannot waste any time. Only the weakest and most vulnerable would suffer. I hope that we will reach an agreement before the summer recess. We will need to see compromise, much compromise on all sides, including here. This is an extraordinary situation, unprecedented in the history of the European Union. And so, in extraordinary times, Germany is willing to defend an extraordinary sum of 500 billion. We need European unity. I firmly believe that the social dimension is just as important as the economic dimension. We need a socially and economically fair Europe. That is key to democratic cohesion. It is the best way to tackle all those that would undermine our democracy and rend us asunder. For this reason, during our Council presidency, we will focus in particular on young people, children's rights. You are the future of Europe, and you have been particularly hard hit by this crisis. We want to look at a European youth employment agenda, a stronger European youth guarantee. We want to help young people find employment. We shouldn't be naive. In many member states, eurosceptics are waiting to misuse this crisis to their own ends. We need to demonstrate the added value of cooperation and coordination at European level. We must show that return to nationalism would reduce us all. We can only progress if we protect Europe together. It is very important that those regions worst affected by the crisis and the people living there can count on our solidarity. It is in our own interests to ensure that. That also means that huge effort is required, but it should not add an excessive burden to the stronger economies. Everyone will have to place themselves in another's shoes. So consider what the different member states can contribute and not in economic, political and societal terms. So I would ask you as MEPs to offer your support today. I firmly believe that extraordinary solidarity is called for, and everyone is willing to show that during this crisis. Germany is. The repercussions of the pandemic will mark and shape our presidency, but there are other major challenges of the day that we need to bear in mind. And those are the other three topics I wanted to mention. Firstly, climate change. Half a year ago, Commission President Ursula von der Leyen outlined a climate protection programme in this chamber. She addressed the urgency of the matter to you, called for immediate action. Europe needs to act to preserve our planet. I firmly believe that we need a global solution to climate protection, and that will only be possible if Europe takes the lead. We have a European Green Deal strategy proposed by the Commission, and that is very important for us. We will closely support that with a move towards a low-carbon society, a green society with strong, innovative companies and entrepreneurship. We need to look at the natural resources and competitiveness of Europe and protect those assets for future generations. It's very important that we have climate neutrality in Europe by 2050, and that must be made legally binding. I welcome the Commission's thinking to set targets for 2030 and increase those targets to 50-55% compared to 1990 levels. We will also support to work on the European climate law. Another major challenge, the fourth point that is very important to us during our presidency, is digitalization. Here too, we need to look at the way we live and do business and change that in a sustainable fashion. Now, many people are fearful at the thought. They fear the pace of change, and I can understand that. But let me be clear here and frank. We need a commitment to digitalization and climate protection. That doesn't mean that we will sweep away everything and endanger the jobs of millions of Europeans. Quite the opposite. This is a much needed change, reform of our societies and economies that will offer greater protection and employment. In recent months, we've seen how Europe is reliant on third countries. Many have seen this in daily digital communications, the different services or technology available. It is very important that Europe enjoys digital sovereignty, particularly in key areas such as artificial intelligence and quantum computing, also in ensuring a secure, trustworthy data infrastructure. We want to make progress in these areas. We also need to effectively protect our democracies against cyber threats and disinformation. All democracies need open debate, and the general public must be able to share knowledge and information. Citizens need to be able to engage in debate to reach a mutual understanding as to how they can live together. We have seen lies and disinformation, and that is no way to fight the pandemic. We can't allow hate speech and incitement to hatred, populism and the like to spread. Democracies need truth and transparency. That is the hallmark of Europe, and that is what Germany will advocate for and push for during its presidency. Fifth point, Europe's responsibility in a globalised world. Now look at any map. Now, in addition to the UK and Western Balkans, we have other external neighbours: Russia, Belarus, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Israel, Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco. At the same time, we are living at a time of huge upheaval. Many member states in Europe are involved in the transatlantic partnership, but Europe needs to rely more on itself. We need to be able to decide the future of Europe in this rapidly changing world. We need to decide whether we take Europe seriously, whether we want Europe's freedom and identity to be safeguarded in times of crisis. So we need a strong European foreign and security policy. Now, one key partner will remain the United Kingdom. We need to shape our future relationship, and that will keep us busy over the next 6 months. Progress in negotiations thus far have been slim, to put it diplomatically. We've agreed with the United Kingdom to accelerate the pace of talks to reach an agreement by autumn, an agreement that can be ratified by the end of the year. I will continue to push for a good solution, but we should also prepare for a possible no-deal scenario. During our presidency, we need to do everything within our power to focus on 3 further foreign policy goals. Firstly, on accession conferences, we need to engage in talks with North Macedonia and Albania so that the Western Balkans have accession prospects. We also need to look at our relationship with our neighbouring continent, Africa. We will have an EU-AU conference, and we need to look at future prospects. We'll talk about migration, for example. There are so many people, unprecedented numbers fleeing, and so Europe has a key responsibility here when it comes to asylum and refugee policy. We need to make progress here. It is very politically sensitive, and we need to show that sensitivity, but we cannot look the other way. We need to face up to our humanitarian responsibilities and show solidarity. Finally, we need to look at our strategic relationship with China. We have a trade relationship, but we have different societal and political views, particularly when it comes to human rights and rule of law. The EU-China summit, unfortunately, could not take place in September, but we want to continue open, frank dialogue with China. During the German presidency, we will continue discussions on foreign and security policy, whether we want to retain the unanimity principle or not, what lessons Europe can learn from the coronavirus pandemic. For example, sovereignty in the healthcare sector, how we can strengthen our sovereignty in this area. We want to consider these issues as part of the Conference on the Future of Europe. Last year, the European Commission suggested such a conference, and you have many ideas on this conference. I would urge that the conference focus on a few key issues to deliver tangible results, so that citizens across different member states can engage in discussions. I've already discussed this today with David Sassoli, the President of the European Parliament. President, Commission President, ladies and gentlemen, do we want to safeguard Europe? Then we need all that I've discussed today: fundamental rights, cohesion, a response to climate change and digitalization. Europe needs to face its responsibility in the world. We need a greener, more digital, more innovative, more competitive Europe. Europe needs to stand for a rules-based order on the world stage, and it must represent innovation and sustainability around the world. That is our vision for Europe. Perhaps I could conclude with a personal note. It is particularly wonderful that I'm delighted to note that during our presidency, Ludwig van Beethoven will be commemorated in December. Whenever I listen to his music, I discover something new that really touches me. The same can be said of Europe. We rediscover it new each and every day, and I'm always impressed by Europe. So I would finish up by referring to the message of Beethoven's music, and I hope that that will guide us into the future. What a better message is there than his? Europe is capable if we stick together and if we stand united. Thank you very much.
Grazie.